Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. I'm Deborah McGrath, Principal Engineer, Technical Product Marketing, and last Thursday's webinar host. This webinar will focus on how to leverage IT asset management and APM, along with a little SPM, to rationalize IT spend. This solution-focused webinar is the first in a new series of quarterly last Thursday's webinars, where we'll discuss and demo how to achieve greater business value with SPM and/or APM seamlessly integrated with other capabilities across the Now platform. Presenting today, both from ServiceNow, are James Ramsey, Director, Outbound Product Management, and Doug Page, who heads up our Outbound Product Management team. Doug and James both have many years' experience at ServiceNow, and both are truly passionate about SPM, EPM, and the better together solutions we provide to our ServiceNow customers. This webinar will include a discussion and demo. We'll then highlight upcoming events, share a key resource, and please feel free to submit your questions during the webinar as well. While most of what we'll be presenting is currently available, please take note of our safe harbor notice that this presentation may contain forward-looking statements that reflect the current beliefs of ServiceNow. All are based on current information available, but actual results may differ materially, and they should not be relied upon in making purchasing decisions. So Doug and James, we're so happy to have you join us today.
Thanks, Deborah. And I think it's a great time to be talking about cost optimization because according to Gartner, this is one of the top 3 priorities for CIOs. And this statistic is also backed up by Forrester research that is telling us that the top 2 priorities for 2023 for IT organizations are 1, upgrading, refreshing, or consolidating business apps, hardware, and software infrastructure. And the second priority, number 2, is modernizing legacy technology. So obviously, this idea of controlling our technology footprint, especially from a cost perspective, is top of mind for IT organizations. So if we think about who's involved with this process and who's responsible for it, first of all, this is a C-level discussion. It comes down to controlling the bottom line of the organization, controlling costs. The CIO and the CTO are creating the vision for the organization. They're creating the mandate to spend time to do this. They're creating the targets that we need to reach. But of course, they can't do this on their own. So who else from their organizations are engaged with this? Firstly, it's asset managers who are tasked with reducing software and hardware spend and to ensure compliance for the organization with their vendors. And also, just as importantly, it's enterprise architects who are defining the technology strategy and optimizing the application portfolio to support the business goals. And when you look at those 2 groups, they can't do this alone, or they can't do this in silos. Why not? First is, if you look at asset management, if they're simply focused in a silo on the reduction of the software and hardware costs, they might be focused on applications that would actually be removed from the organization by the enterprise architects. And if you look at the enterprise architects, if they're doing this alone, you're only getting the benefit from the portfolio level decisions and not what's happening at the software and hardware level. So it's clear that these groups need to work together to make sure that real optimization is happening to reduce license, infrastructure, maintenance, and support costs. But in reality, this isn't simple. If it was simple, organizations would achieve this very quickly. They'd spend a month a year doing this and it would be done. But the reality is, when James and I go and talk with organizations, they realize that their technology landscape is complex. If you look at the information that they need to make this decision or these decisions, it tends to be located in many different systems. Also, they don't have information about how these applications are being serviced, including incident information. They also maybe don't have direct access to their technology standards to understand where they may need to make decisions based on those considerations. Finally, where are the costs for these applications and the software and hardware, and where is that located? Very importantly is contract information. If you're going to eliminate an application, there's no use doing it if you just sign a contract for 3 years. There are other things that you can do that are going to take out costs in the short term, and then you could wait 2 years to reduce that application or to eliminate that application because you're already committed for 3 years. So another key piece of decision making. Finally, integrations. Understanding where you have integrations and complexity in the relationship between your applications is very important. If you have two applications that by taking them out, either would save you $1 million, but one has no integrations, the other has 12 integrations, you're definitely going to move and take out the one that has no integrations, a lot less complexity. Also, where do we have information about customer satisfaction, technical fit of these applications? And where are we going to do the actual organizational change? And finally, what are the active users that we have on this application? How many people are actually using it? So as you can see, to make good decisions, to align with these strategies that are very important in 2023 and 2024, organizations need access to a lot of information to make those good decisions. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to James, who's going to show us what this actually looks like in ServiceNow.
Thanks, Doug. So as Doug was mentioning, we often get asked the exam question in terms of how can ServiceNow help us drive across our technology optimization initiative or our simplification or rationalization initiative. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a series of steps which combine strategic portfolio management with application portfolio management and IT asset management. How we bring all of that data that Doug's just been talking around that underpins the decisions that we need to make. So I think the first starting point, and going back to Doug's first slide in terms of what the analysts are saying, every organization on their strategic roadmap has some sort of strategic initiative that's aligned to rationalization or simplification. So on our first view, we're looking at the strategic planning workspace. I'm looking at my strategic roadmap for my company, Acme Bank. And on here, I can see all of our current strategic initiatives we're looking to drive forward in 23, 24, and 25. One of those, which we've got particular interest in today, is optimizing our technology investments. And we're looking to make an overall saving of around $50 million. Now, that is aligned to our strengthen, cost, and capital efficiency strategic priority. Now, as well as planning that out on the roadmap and when we're looking to deliver and attain those benefits, I can also then start to look at the targets or the goals we've actually set in order to actually drive that particular initiative. So I can see against our strengthen, cost, and capital efficiency strategic priority, we've defined a goal in terms of reducing technology CapEx and OpEx, and we've defined a series of targets. Now, in this particular example, we've got a monetary target in terms of that 50 million reduction in legacy support software costs, and also a non-monetary target in terms of a 25% reduction in the number of legacy applications in our application portfolio. Now, those are going to be what drive and help us measure success in this rationalization initiative that we're underpinning. Now, armed with that strategic view of the world, we then look at those other personas that Doug was talking about. So let's look into the world of the enterprise architect. Now, they will engage inside the process, and their starting point will be the enterprise architecture workspace as part of application portfolio management. Now, key to the architecture workspace is giving me as an enterprise architect insights into things I need to know about. So as I come on here, I can see an insights around my technology portfolio, and it's telling me all around where I've got business applications that are at risk from underlying technology that is going end of life. I can see impacts from hardware and software products together, all in one space. If I scroll down, I've then got an overall insight into what's going on across the application portfolio in terms of where I've got technical debt and also where I've got business applications at high risk. So lots of information there for me to quickly dive in and address potential problems. Now, just before I go further in this use case, I want to just talk around that interaction between the enterprise architect's world, i.e. through application portfolio management, and the asset manager's world from an IT asset management perspective. And one of the things that glues this together is something we call the technology portfolio management data model. So behind the scenes, as we're able to look in terms of the interaction between business applications and their supporting software products, what we're able to quickly understand is where that relationship sits. So in the background, we're pulling all of this information together from a solution standpoint, and from a risk perspective, I can quickly and easily see within inside the system my business applications, the instances of those applications, and then the software products associated with those instances and applications, and including where those software products are actually installed. So we've got full visibility of that underlying data, which is fundamental to when we're looking at rationalizing our overall technology estate. So built on that foundation, let's then look at how we can go about helping organizations making decisions on what we want to remove. I'm just going to go into my list view here. And one of the key starting points to this journey is, after defining what those targets are, we want to create this single view of the target technologies, the target applications that we're looking to rationalize. Now, interestingly, from an APM perspective, we're going to pull together our central inventory of business applications. But from an asset management perspective, they've got a view of all of the software products that are being utilized across the organization, along with usage and the costs of those software products. Now, interestingly, when you look from at those two areas, you can often find, for example, SaaS applications that are residing within inside, say, the asset management list, the software product list, that actually don't exist within inside the business application repository. So if you take, for example, somebody in marketing, for example, has gone on a credit card and procured some licenses of Monday.com, for example, that might be there within inside the asset management list. But because it's sort of shadow IT, the enterprise architects may be unaware of that actually being on the estate of the organization. So one of the key starting points we have is how we bring all of that together. So we have a fundamental defined list of all those business applications that are underpinning the capabilities we're driving in the organization and of their driving business processes. Once we've established that, we want to then measure how they're performing. And what we can do with that is utilize something we call the indicator framework. Now, without application portfolio management out of the box, we provide 18 or 19 indicators. But users of APM are then able to actually create their own indicators against metrics that they may want to measure. So the typical ones we have out of the box are measuring, say, user satisfaction or CSAT, measuring the technology fit, the business value of the application. We also have indicators that go away and pull information from other areas of the platform, like number of incidents of this application that have happened within the last month coming from ITSM. Maybe we're going to pull in costs from software asset management or hardware asset management. All of these indicators can be defined inside that indicator framework. And once they're defined, we can then look at capturing those scores on a periodic basis. So having done that, what we then find, if I go to my application scoring list, we'll have a list of all of our applications. So I've got an example here of some of the applications we have in this particular inventory. And across this list, across the top, we've got some of the examples of those indicators where we're pulling information. So we've got cost-related information. Now, the app TCO, that might be information we're pulling in from, say, an external source. Software costs and hardware costs, we could be pulling that in from ITAM. CSAT through to business value, these are things from APM. As I mentioned, number of incidents from ITSM. As we go across the way, we could be looking at calculating the number of days to renew coming from contracts on the platform, and we could be pulling number of integrations from information inside the CMDB. But actually, from an organizational standpoint, the type of indicators and the ones you want to add within inside your analysis is sort of endless. You can define the ones that are pertinent to you. Now, I've been working with customers around this type of use case. We started out by identifying what those indicators, those measurements need to be. And then we typically work on the process of defining a scorecard against an application. So on this particular business application, we've actually configured a set of attributes which are pulling in those indicator scores so we can readily see them on the application form. And to Doug's point about these decisions not being easy to take, we've actually looked at how we can split the decision making into two halves. So on the left-hand side here, we're looking in terms of the value of rationalization of this particular application, the attendance and payroll management system. And on the right-hand side, we're looking at the complexity in terms of how we deliver that rationalization. And the aim is, what we're going to do is calculate a rationalization score and a complexity score, because there's two halves to the equation. So when we're looking at the value of rationalizing, we obviously got costs in mind. What are the cost savings going to be if we can rationalize and take out this application? But we also then want to have other dimensions. So we want to understand, well, is this actual application being used by the organization? Is it satisfying the users? Is it giving what they want it to do? Does it fit with our technology strategy? We also need to understand, where does it sit in terms of how it supports the business? How many business capabilities is it supporting? So, i.e., what value? If it's not supporting any capabilities, that means it's adding no real value to the business. So there's a high value of rationalizing it and taking out the organization. So having looked at those factors, we calculate that rationalization score. So the higher the score, the more benefit we get from rationalizing it or taking it, retiring it out of the estate. And on the right-hand side, then, we're looking at the complexity. This is, what does it take to actually remove it? And the things then to factor in are things like, well, how many users are actively using this application? And how many of those users we're going to have to transition onto something else? How many days left we've got in terms of the renewal? So have we got a long period of time in terms of how we can plan this, or is it looking at it in a short number of days to actually do this? And complexity from the level of integration of this application to other applications into the estate. All of that needs to be factored into account. So by using these indicators, we're able to make those analysis scores around complexity. Now, what customers then look at is, well, how are we going to visualize this? How are we going to help us make decisions? Now, typically, that's going to come in some form of dashboard. So this is just an example of a dashboard I set up for one of the customers I'm working with. And it's a simple 3-tab dashboard. The landscape is all about just giving that view of, look, we've got all of this information pertinent to our decision-making sitting on the ServiceNow platform. So on the left-hand side, we're looking from a financial perspective. On the right-hand side, we're looking at it from a risk view of the world. So we could be pulling business applications from APM and the top-down spend on those applications this year, relating from an APM standpoint, and a bottom-up view of the software spend of the associated software products related to those applications. I can then break down that total application spend by the category of applications. I can go down and look at in terms of the publisher of those applications. On the right-hand side, pulling information through from ITAM, I can understand how many end-of-life software products do I have. And by end of life, I'm talking those products that are going end of support, end of extended support, and end of life. And then understanding, by combining that data in that TPM data model, how many of our business applications are at lifecycle risk based on these 145 software products. And then if I want to go to an extra level of detail, which is typically where the asset management will want to go, I can then understand by publisher where those risks are by software product, what business applications are impacted, and also write down into, from an infrastructure standpoint, where those software products are actually being installed and where that alias date which is causing that risk is coming from. So that gives me that landscape view. So as I mentioned at the beginning, that's sort of the foundation on making those decisions. Now, because we've got that indicator framework, scoring applications, in the background, we can then start to use workflows to automate identifying recommendation candidates for rationalization. So we can see on the top right here, I've got 27 identified candidates. Now, if I go to the recommendations tab, this gives me more detail on those 27. So at the top left, that's just a bubble chart showing me the overall estate and breaking that down by what we call the disposition. So whether we're going to retire, sustain, migrate, or invest, and we're going to focus in on those ones we're going to retire. On the top right, I've got a heat map, which is giving me an overall picture of value in rationalization down the y-axis, complexity to rationalize on the x-axis, and the value in the middle is the total savings within inside this category. So if you look at it, I've got some applications which are very high, going to give me very high value by rationalizing, and I can make $19 million worth of savings on that category, but they're highly complex to actually remove from the estate. So do I want to focus on that 19 million to begin with, or should I turn my attention to the 14 million of very high rationalization value, which I've got low complexity to remove? Now, to explain that a bit more, if I scroll down onto the list here, we can see our 27 candidates in this list, and they're ordered by descending value of rationalization. So the very high ones, the ones we want to get rid of, are going to give us most return at the top, to the low rationalization ones at the bottom. So we can see from an application standpoint, we've got our buy it application, very high in terms of the value we'll get back from rationalizing it. We can see high levels of cost, and we can see it's not performing well. Got lots of incidents. It's got technical risk. So obviously, it's something we want to get rid of. But on the right-hand side, we can see this is highly complex to rationalize. We've got 15,000 users currently actively using Buy It, which we're going to have to facilitate and give them something else to perform their tasks. We've got not a long time left on their contract, so potentially we're going to have to renew that so we can move forward in terms of rationalizing. And we've got 16 integrations. So all in all, highly complex to actually rationalize. Whereas if you compare that with the CustTrack application, here we're seeing something, very high, we want to get rid of, lots of cost, and it's got a low complexity because we've got not many users we have to go through a change management process with, no integrations. So a more simple way to take out. So we can focus on maybe taking out CustTrack. So for that, what I want to do, I want to action that recommendation. And for that, I will create a demand, which will feed into the demand pipeline. Just while I'm on here, just added insight we can provide, particularly from an asset management perspective, is I can see, based on all of those candidates we've identified, the impact of the underlying software. So I can see against each one of those rationalization candidates, what software products are related and how many installs, how many servers are impacted by those applications. So I can understand if I want to get rid of the attendance and payroll management system, I'm going to actually be able to retire 3 database servers as part of this. So that gives that connection with enterprise architecture and asset management, which is often not taken into account as part of rationalization. So having identified the candidates we want to do, those will then feature on our success tab. So we can understand the number of recommendations that we're currently actioning, those demands that we've created, and identifying from that where our identified savings are going to be against rationalization of the business applications and also the underlying software products. I can also get visualization then in terms of where those benefits are going to accrue as we perform and deliver on our roadmap. And that's the next step. So going back into the world of SPM, as we create those demands to activate those recommendations, those will now appear on my roadmap underneath my optimized technology investments strategic initiative. So these are all the things we're now looking to do. I can now look at it from a timeline perspective. It also then gives me the ability then to hand those off to the various teams that will then be delivering this activity. So as those teams are executing it, whether doing it from a project's perspective or whether they're using an agile methodology, this will give me visibility in terms of where we are, the progress being made, and the status of delivering against those activities. And as I'm then doing that, we can go back to our targets and utilizing automation from performance analytics in terms of the goal framework within inside SPM. What that will then give me is an automatic update of where we actually are in delivering on those targets based on the work that's been undertaken to deliver those recommendations that we're currently actioning. So it enables, whether I'm the enterprise architect, asset manager, or I'm looking at it from an executive standpoint, I've got that up-to-minute picture of where we are in terms of progress on delivering on those rationalization targets. So that was sort of a quick run through of how we look to connect that end-to-end process in terms of delivering that rationalization initiative, how we link strategies from an SPM perspective with the world of the enterprise architect to facilitate decision making, and also connecting the world of the asset managers. So we got that underlying information coming from asset management in terms of cost, and then also in terms of life cycle data, so we can then get the solutions and start making recommendations on where we focus our rationalization. And with that, I'll hand back to you, Deborah.
Thank you, James and Doug, for showing us how we can leverage APM, ITAM, and SPM together as that single seamless solution. It was great seeing how it enables much more collaborative end-to-end rationalization with all those different roles, and all guided by business strategy, and how it provides, at the end of the day, much greater clarity around technology decision-making. We hope to have you join us again for additional solution-focused discussions, so customers can see how they can get even greater value with SPM and or APM and other ServiceNow applications and capabilities. So I'd like to share 2 live on ServiceNow events and an informative resource for you. First, on October 17th, we have a webinar on resource assignment in Project Workspace. This one really drills into a variety of the different use cases for where and how you can leverage the new resource assignment feature. Join us for our next Last Thursday's webinar on Thursday, October 27th, which will be on technology portfolio management. And this will be presented by Mark Casto and Gerard Berthet. And you'll learn how to manage technology obsolescence risk in ServiceNow APM, and you'll receive guidance on how to optimally set up and use TPM. And you can view this webinar again and access any of our Last Thursday's webinars on our YouTube Last Thursdays with SPM webinars playlist. Use the tiny URL in the blue box in the upper right corner of the screen. And finally, we also have a resource for you, APM plus ITAM Better Together Solution Brief. Scan this QR code for that. Thank you so much, James Ramsey and Doug Page. Thank you to my Last Thursday's co-producer, John Lim. And as always, much appreciation to our Last Thursday's audience for joining us. We will see you on the next Last Thursday in October.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks, Deborah.